Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me a gentleman I was told I should have on the program. Does things a little bit differently, actually somewhat similar to another guest I had on, Peter Brathwaite. I have with me today Evan Saskin of Blue Lion Building. Evan, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. This is, I'm a fan. It's really nice to be able to sit down and talk about architecture and construction and all this great stuff.
Yeah, well, so I want to start by saying Evan doesn't pursue the exact traditional career of architect. And I say this because if you're out there and you're a student, or you're an intern architect and you're a junior architect, wherever you are in your career, if it's early in your career, just know that there are different opportunities available to you. And I say this because what your practice is not just architecture. So why don't you tell people about what your practice is?
Sure.
Before we dive into Evan's story, I want to take a moment to thank one of our partners, the Doors, who approach design as far more than just function. It's about redefining what's possible in the home. The Doors are redefining what's possible in windows and doors. Their range is unmatched, from PVC and aluminum systems by Rayners, Schuco, Aluron, Aluplast, and Aluprof, to wood-clad and solid wood frames and completely custom solutions. They create roof-to-wall assemblies, knee walls, curtain walls, and exterior doors that aren't just functional but architectural statements. This is where it gets exciting for designers and architects too. Pivot doors, oversized spans, and even stone, concrete, and ceramic face doors that blur the lines between building and sculpture. They understand materials at a level that lets you integrate performance, durability, and beauty seamlessly. Most importantly, they work collaboratively with architects, builders, and homeowners and designers, making sure that whatever vision you have, from traditional detailing to ultra-modern minimalism, can actually be built and delivered. For me, that's what makes them stand out. They're not just supplying products, they're enabling design. And I look through their products every single day from my studio here in the backyard. If you'd like to learn more about The Doors, I'm happy to connect you with Martin, Marta, and their team at The Doors. Email me, it's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca.
So I'm an architect.
Yep.
First and foremost, in a lot of ways. And I think that that's the lens that we look at for all of the problems that we solve. And I couldn't do what I do without my architectural education behind me. But Blue Lion Building isn't an architecture firm. Like, the main thing that we do is run this company, which is the design and build office behind infill housing development, really all over Toronto, but especially in some kind of West End urban neighborhoods.
Okay.
And so primarily what we do is act as a manager of the entire development process, from like land acquisition, financing, feasibility studies, all of the figuring out what to do on a site, designing it, getting it approved, really obsessing over the unit mixes, all of the traditional architectural scopes and interior design scopes, and then we build them. It's like a pretty fine grain of like general contracting in-house, complete them, finish them, market them, sell them, and always at this small scale. So there's like a huge range of work that we do, but in this very tightly vertically integrated niche of just like infill housing, 3, 4, 5 units on a site in Toronto. That's what we do.
Got it. Okay. Well, and thank you for the understanding and description of how the business manages itself. And I say this because, there's so many different avenues that you can take an architecture or design degree, and this is a very interesting one to take on. So now, having established what it is that you do at the highest level, let's go into what led you down this path of obsession with seeing through all of the details associated with this.
There's a real satisfaction in like finding your niche, I guess, at some point. But we didn't get here on purpose, right? Like, even in hindsight, it barely makes sense. The beginning I
Yeah,
mean,
like
yeah,
were you 2.5 and took some crayons and drew on your wall?
a little bit. Okay, so I guess to go all the way back, like my father's father was an engineer, worked at an engineering firm, more involved in like industrial processes and making factories and things like that. It's
Hmm.
like Russian Jewish immigrants to Montreal in the the 30s, 40s, 50s, and they did some cool modern architecture as a result of being who they were. I think there's like a Mark pharmaceutical factory that had the first ever bit of curtain wall in Canada. But he lived in an apartment that is not like a thing that we really have in Toronto. But in Montreal, there's a much, I think, richer historical apartment building typology where people have these larger multi-bedroom family friendly units. And
Hmm.
so I think for me this idea of modern architecture and obsession with design and kind of like comfort domestic life, your grandparents baking cookies and all that kind of stuff, along with that aesthetic and sort of like denser, more cosmopolitan urban housing types, like those have all been really tightly swirled together for
Hmm.
me forever. So that's, I guess, where it really starts. The
So
idea of
how old were you when you were
oh,
in Montreal? Were you
um,
born there?
no, sorry. So I was born in
Oh,
Toronto.
you're
I grew
born.
up in
Oh,
Toronto. This is just going to
oh,
visit. My
oh,
dad's
got it,
there.
got it,
It's
got it.
5 hours down the 401.
Okay.
And, like a lot of my friends here in Toronto's neighborhoods, their parents and grandparents all lived in houses and suburban
Yeah,
houses.
yeah,
And here are my grandparents that lived in this, like, cooler to me, like denser, urban, teak wood cabinetry, kind of, polished brass ashtrays in the hallways. And it's kind of like brutalist concrete building, like 8 stories high on
yeah.
Sherbrooke. And it just, I guess I've always had this idea that idea of like home and comfort and like higher design and luxury and city living could be like a little more tightly integrated with each other than like the usual models that we saw all around.
Hmm.
That description of design and comfort being intertwined really resonates with me. And it also brings to mind one of our partners who's built their entire brand identity about creating that same seamless connection in the home. Kaplan's is more than an appliance store. It's a Toronto institution, family owned and operated for decades, and trusted by generations of homeowners, architects, and designers. When you step into their showroom, you're not just browsing. You're entering a curated design space. Each space is carefully composed, from Sub-Zero and Wolf to Miele, La Cornue, Jenner, Fisher and Paykel, and more. All set against proper lighting and environments to let you imagine how these products will live in your project. What sets Kaplan's apart is their service philosophy. They understand that appliances aren't just functional, they're part of how a home feels and functions every single day. Their specialists guide you through the selection process with knowledge and care, helping narrow choices without overwhelming you. And when it comes to delivery and installation, their dedicated scheduling department takes on the complexity, managing fluctuations, solving logistics, and making sure the process is seamless. Isn't that combination of heritage, expertise, and care that makes Kaplan's the trusted name in our community? Something special? They elevate what could be a box store errand into an experience that's about design, quality, and peace of mind. To find out more, email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca.
And I'm happy to connect you with their team.
That didn't really translate into an architectural practice for a long, long time, but like that was always just sort of there as this background ingredient of like domestic life and what else it could look like. So that's like the I guess pre-early side of it. My dad was a builder. My dad went to architecture school at McGill in the 70s, so I definitely always grew up with like drafting tables and blueprints around. I always had summer jobs on construction sites, just like pushing a broom before swinging a hammer. And I was a pretty like small, bookish kid, but I always, at the same time, like had a lot of just comfort around being on construction sites and, walking into construction sites whenever I saw them, and just feeling like that was how drawings turned into buildings. And so that was always really sort of a piece of the puzzle of it also. That when we started having, years and years later, when we started building an architecture practice, it became clear that running construction sites was always going to be part of that also. And then I'm trying to think of what else is like the key ingredients to how we got to where we are. I got an undergraduate degree, but then I went to U of T to get my master's in architecture like 2004, 5, 6.
Okay.
And at that time, the school was really going through like a couple of different main schools of thought, but like housing wasn't really a big part of it. And so I wasn't really thinking about housing at that time. There was definitely a condominium boom going on in Toronto, but I think people weren't looking to that as examples of exemplary architecture. And so in school, we were a lot more obsessed with like very, very high-end single-family homes and more naturalist settings.
Right.
There was that whole sort of like Zaha Hadid era of sort of, budgetless international museum commissions, which was, of course, just like part of
A falsity.
Oh man, but like that was definitely part of our aesthetic diet at the time.
Yeah.
And then the people that were working there in those years, I think were really thinking deeply about that question of like architectural process and what are the things that architects really do and what other things can that problem solving skill set apply to. And that's really stuck with us. Like that's really stuck with me in a deep, deep way, that to be an architect is to have these tools for describing buildings, for communicating with other people about buildings, plan section, elevation, architectural detailing. There's just like a language for abstracting and communicating with other people about what a building is and how it functions. And that has really stuck with us as like those are the tools that we use to make more interesting spaces that solve other kinds of problems. And I'll get there, but like those are the tools in a lot of ways that we're using now to solve regulatory and financial problems in a lot of ways. Like we're the people who navigate changing bylaws and changing tax codes and changing building codes and understand like what are the architectural implications of all of those things. That's a big, big part of who we are as a practice now.
But it wasn't that way when it started. I want to ask you, did you have a parent? Like was your dad saying like you've got to go follow this path, or
no?
Or was
you were wonderful about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a whole other degree under my belt before I came to architecture school. I think, while I grew up with a real comfort around the industry, I was like relatively aged, like I was 25 years old before I really thought about this as a career. And before then, it was a whole bunch of different things.
That perspective on process and how things come together reminds me of Aquanta. They're a pool company that take the same kind of design-first, forward-thinking approach, only in water. That idea of seeing the whole process from permissions to construction really resonates. Very similar to another partner that we know, takes a similar design-first, detail-driven approach, but in a different medium. Aquanta pools approach their work the way an architect approaches a building. They don't just drop a pool into a backyard, they engineer the entire environment around it. One of the smartest parts of their process is how they literally build a protective structure around the pool during construction. It means weather doesn't slow them down, timelines stay intact, and clients can trust that the project will finish on schedule. Their product line is European in origin, sleek, refined, and built to perform for decades, but without the inflated European price point. It's high-quality engineering paired with practical value. What makes Aquanta special is that they see water as part of the architecture. Every decision, from hydraulics to finishes to lighting, is considered with the same care you'd give to a home. They bring forward-thinking solutions and deliver a finished product that feels integrated, timeless, and truly custom. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to email me. It's Jonathan, that's Jonathan at waldenhomes.ca, and I'm happy to connect you with their amazing team.
What was your dad building?
Housing at scale. So sort of subdivisions and like larger scale city infill townhome projects and some towers as well. Like it was a whole sort of growth trajectory through my teenage years and the 20s and beyond. But at that time, yeah, it was really about sort of Toronto and the immediate environs of Toronto and mass housing, like at a very different scale from what we do. Like I don't think we ever built more than 4 or 5 units at a time. I don't think he ever built less than 40 or 50 units at a time. So there's a difference there, but nonetheless, this sort of understanding of how the sausage gets made, like how housing gets permitted to exist in places where it didn't previously exist.
Right. Okay. And so did you find yourself, as you started to take more interest in this, did you find yourself going from like the kid that may or and I'm making an assumption, so actually I'll rephrase this question. Were you an interested person in the position your father had in construction, or did you just kind of accept it as this is what dad does? And then when you became more interested in that field, did you start to engage in those conversations?
Oh, that came much, much, much later.
It
Yeah,
did.
no, you're right. It wasn't. I mean, I had like a happy urban middle class childhood and certainly like recognized that there were things about engaging in construction and architecture that could, be part of an adult life, I guess. But no, there was no direct kind of like, it's time to follow in the footsteps and do this again. No, that came much, much later. And I think the sort of mentors and other influences that I've had along the way have been a lot more circuitous for better or worse. But, we've tried a number of different kinds of things before getting here. Right out of school, my wife was in graduate school in the UK in London. So I went to London to find a job as an architect with like a freshly minted master's degree in architecture. It was really hard. It was like my first time going to a place where I wasn't from there at all. I had a 2-year visa, but I'd not gone to school there. I had no friends or connections.
I was going to say the
industry
connections element.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Like just nothing. I think Google Maps had been released that summer. So I mapped out every single architecture firm in the city of London, and I would take a different bus out to the end of a line and walk home and stop at every firm along the way with my like huge black portfolio case and just like cold call, knock on the door. I have since, as a person who hires people, come to realize that that probably wasn't the most efficient or effective process for getting a job. But it gave me a great education of the city and the way that infrastructure works in like an ancient, enormous, complicated city and housing. And the architecture firms there are always in the most tucked out of the way places. Like if the architecture firm is, number whatever, 22 on like Pennyweather Lane, then you're like, you finally find this thing, which is like a dead end that's only accessed off the end of some other street. And the houses only go up to 20 and you can't figure out where 22 is. So that was really like a great life.
It's etched in a stone on the ground.
Totally. Yeah. It's etched in like a stone in my soul right now. Like the trauma was there. But I walked in the door at like the 100 and something place that I went into, and Hannah Corlett is an architect there who I still have like a good mentoring relationship with, who is just a few years older than me, but at the time seemed like, a real adult, where I was like a freshly graduated architecture school student, and brought me into like a small husband and wife firm with 3 other interns, and we did incredibly high-end housing like single family houses with, like tens of millions of pounds in construction budget. And it was a good time to be doing that kind of a thing. And
It seems as though the education you received when you were at U of T and looking at all the budgetless Zaha Hadid stuff ended up coming to fruition when you went to UK.
so there's actually a connection. It's funny you would say Zaha Hadid. We entered a competition. I wasn't involved in this. This was like weeks before I joined that firm, and they entered a competition for the Iraqi National Assembly building. It was a blind competition, and they won. Their submission was picked as like, this is the building that the whoever decides, the Iraqi finance minister, awarded it to, and they opened the envelope very much expecting it to be Zaha Hadid as the name of the entry, and it wasn't. I think they were all like, "Who the f is assemblage architects in London, UK?" And there was this sort of awkward moment where they're like, "We're totally okay to give you the prize money, but can we still hire like ZHA to build the building?" And I think my guys were like, "Yeah, we don't know how to deliver like $100 million building in a different country. We're like a husband and wife in their 30s with 3 interns."
And we would love to take the cash
Yeah,
so that we
exactly.
could go figure this practice out.
So it was, so I guess in hindsight, I showed up there just shortly after they had a bit of a windfall. And she later confessed to me, we didn't know the University of Toronto, but you like walked in and had a clean shirt and spoke well and figured if nothing else, you can answer the phones. Like, this is an acceptable person. And then I just like voraciously learned, right? Because we were detailing, there was like a garden, and underneath the garden, there was a swimming pool. And underneath the swimming pool, there was a banquet hall. And so the amount of structural engineering and exquisite detailing, and you just draw everything. Like every single face of the building gets drawn. And I come out of architecture school where you learn the technology, you learn how to recognize good quality drawing about big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But this was my first time pulling together from zero to construction, like the instructions on how to build a building. And I knew some things about building buildings. I've been on construction sites, but I mean, like, we're a long way from Kansas at this point. This is not stick framed infill housing. Everything here is like concrete and steel, and like at most 3 millimeter tolerances. Nobody knows what a 2x4 is. They have accents. They don't know what a bath is. They laugh at me for like the way I pronounce things, joinery and millwork. And so it was great, like a great, great, great time of my life and early marriage, and like learning a new place and how housing works there. But like it was a whole other like postgraduate education in, I don't know, I still hold a really aspirational, like architecture at its highest level.
What I find really interesting about this, and if you're listening, and I've kind of said this a lot over the last little while, but you got to imagine at the time at which this is happening, like if you wanted to have a call with some consultant on this and you want to like screen share like we do now, that was not happening. Right?
Oh no,
like not at all. You're finding ways to meet in person. There are either flights or there's, if you're lucky, if Skype is working at this point consistently.
We're taking the tube to the mechanical engineer's office because I've printed out his drawings and colored in with 7 different highlighters what each of the supply and return main sleeves are, and telling him I think he can untangle them. But we couldn't do that over the phone. I guess people have fax machines. We didn't.
Fax, it's scanners.
Yeah, our scanner never quite worked.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like this was a time when the simplicity, the basics of the simplicity of being able to now communicate with each other is such an element of you take for granted comparatively to what you had to deal with.
I mean,
20 plus years ago.
I swear it was this century, but like we didn't have indoor plumbing. Like we had to go outside and across a courtyard to go to the loo. Like it was definitely a little bit of, we were not the most technologically advanced. We didn't have all the modern creature comforts built into that place.
Are you coming to work? Well, here's a diaper.
Exactly. It's just across the courtyard, unheated. Actually, do you know what? So there's a connection here also. So our company is called Blue Lion Building, and Cameron, my wife, and I lived on Blue Lion Place when we lived in London. And that, when we started this, I think really, it's a tiny little nothing of a street. It's a driveway. And there's this idea in London specifically that the geography is so complicated that in order to become like a taxi cab driver there, you have to learn every single road. I read this National Geographic article about this, and it takes like 4 years to kind of shove all the information into your brain. That whole body of information, how all the roads work, is collectively known as the knowledge. Remember, no Google Maps either, right? We had the A to Z is like a spiral bound flip book that is like an atlas of the city.
The Burleys.
Also
Here.
Burleys,
Yeah.
And so I guess the National Geographic article said that these guys, the topography of their brain actually changes. You do CAT scans of these guys, and the shape of their brain alters when they absorb the knowledge. But on the rare occasion that I took one of those cows, they still didn't know where Blue Lion Place was. And and then you would describe, it's over here off Long Lane, whatever. And yeah, no problem, they find it. But the idea that even in this incredibly well mapped urban dense place, there could be this tiny little tucked away thing with really cool, weird housing at the end of it. We were in an old wallpaper factory at the time. That really resonated with me, that like even in and amongst all this density, there are secrets, lots of them, and they're cool. Like they're cool places to live. And so housing being kind of hidden or secret or special in some way is like really core to the Blue Lion identity, and is named for that Blue Lion.
And where was your wife working at the time?
She was a student.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
So she was.
You said that. You said that.
So the Courtauld doing her like graduate work there and art history. So yeah.
Okay.
We were. So it was a great trial by everything, and then 2008 came and like financial collapse, and we came back to Toronto, and I got a job here at Architects Alliance, where my friend who now runs and studio, but at the time had a job at that AA, and introduced me to someone there. And if my experience in London,
Daniel.
Yes.
Yeah.
If my experience in London finding employment was ruling, my experience in Toronto was maybe unfairly easy in the opposite extreme. It was like we came back for a weekend, and before I came, I had a half dozen job interviews lined up, and like 5 out of 6 of them gave offers of employment, and it was just seamless. And we sort of came back here and slid right into firm life, and worked for Peter Clues for 4 or 5 years there, and really sort of put my head into high-rise construction and the development industry in Toronto. And I knew even then, like I had said to Cameron early on then, that I was really sad about leaving London, that if we came back to Canada, I didn't think I could just be an architect here. It felt like in London there was so much to do architecturally. There's just so much fabric to attend to, new buildings to build, old buildings to rehabilitate, an openness to spending money on architecture in a way that seemed really exciting until it just dried up.
Right.
But here, I don't know, not to be like a cynic, and I was a lot
younger. Okay.
I wasn't 30 years old at the time, but I definitely already sensed that at that time, 2008, Toronto didn't seem to me to have like the same kind of opportunity. And I think we've been good later about finding and building those opportunities and creating new things, but at that time, like I just didn't see it.
Right.
So I detailed high rises and rearranged, parking spots for a couple of years.
I was going to ask you, so like, what did it look like when you were doing something that was so interesting?
I don't know. It was
high rises and parking spots.
High rises and parking spots. I got really into the approval processes and understanding the bureaucracy.
Internally or with the city?
With the city. No, yeah, with the city.
Okay.
It was like a 30, 40 person firm. It wasn't like a massive political organization by any stretch.
Okay.
I think it was like you got to bloom where you plant it, you know? And so I really got deep into that and into the construction side of it and into understanding, like in London, our document sets were a set of instructions for how to build the building. And word bespoke gets thrown around a lot, but I think there was really something there in London that making a house for a person, of like an incredibly wealthy person, is a process of taking measurements of every aspects of their life and their lifestyle and crafting an architectural solution to meet it perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, what are your habits of eating and showering and clothing and preparing for your day on what kind of daily and seasonal rhythms? And how can we invent things that are like long lasting and delightful and beautiful that like embrace and not coddle, but just like perfectly contour themselves around a life like that? It's like a great question to be asking. And it shouldn't be reserved purely for the kind of highest, like most expensive kind of architecture, but we learn the skills there. In Toronto, I mean, I can go off about the Toronto condo market, and maybe we should, but at that time, our drawing sets were much more like a legal document for navigating one, a sequence of approvals processes with the city. The city says we're going to grant you permission to construct X number of saleable square footage, so long as you satisfy all of these engineering studies and criterias and planning approval processes with consultation of all the appropriate authorities. And it seems incredibly Byzantine when you kind of zoom out and map it all. But like, it's a big complicated system. I like big complicated systems. So you learn about that. And then subsequently, it really again functions as a component, like the document set, the drawings become a key component of a legally binding agreement between, you know, you, the architect, and the people who are funding the construction of the building and the constructors of the building.
Right.
And so it's much less about what's the correct way to adapt to your process of making breakfast, and much more like, how do we make sure that we have breakfast making facilities for all 386, households that are going to be in this building.
Right.
I have subsequently learned to like place a lot less value judgment on one of those things over the other. Like, housing is housing and everybody needs it, and problems have to be solved. And to the extent that you can bring like love and care and empathy into both of those processes, like that's really what makes it good. But the mechanisms that trigger your boss getting paid are really different in those two worlds. And so,
Which subsequently also allow you to get paid.
yeah, of course. Like I'm an employee at this phase in my career through and through.
And were you feeling like, were you satisfied with the work that you were doing, or were you feeling like it wasn't really resonating with what was kind of burning inside of you, or had that not happened yet?
It's a great question. I think at the time I thought that I wasn't deeply inspired by the architectural work that we were doing. But I also think in hindsight, like I would so clearly not be capable doing what we do with the amount of like control and understanding of the process had I not spent literal years chipping away these much larger processes. So do I wish that I could go back and spend, I think I spent 2 years doing the construction drawings for a tower at 224 Kent. It's like directly across the street north of Roy Thompson Hall. It's like a very skinny, tall tower. I must have spent, I don't know, weeks drawing every exit stair in that building. Do I think that everybody needs to spend weeks and weeks drawing exit stairs in buildings in order to become like a professionally fulfilled architect? Like, I don't. But was it necessary in hindsight for me to do that kind of thing in order to understand how all the different pieces fit together? Like, yeah, absolutely. And, there's something to be said for building that empathy, not just for the occupant of the building, but for the person who's going to build that building. Like, sure, it took me weeks to draw all the stairs, but there's a much more capitally intensive, labor intensive process of fabricating and installing all of those stairs. And the
Yes.
stairs are the spine of a building. Like if something's off, you don't have a building. Like you can no longer comply with building codes. And it ties together all the floor plans and all the building sections. Like they are the thing that takes a building from an idea to like a functional, permanent part of your city.
Right.
So,
The monotony is a requirement.
and it must be approached with like rigor and intellect, and you're bringing to bear like all of these sort of human-centered design ideas as well as all of the like regulatory just like frameworks for these things. I mean, to this day there's a few things now I have so much respect for. I will not go to like a special building, like a rarefied, museum, or generally like museums, but like these sort of like or like sports stadiums. But like anytime I'm in any kind of celebrated exquisite building, I want to go see the exit stairs. I want to go to the bathrooms. I designed a loading dock for Theater Park. That was that 224 King project, and Peter Clues looked at the drawings. I was like, what is this garbage? And I was like it's the loading dock. It gets a garbage truck into the building and out again. The turning radius is there. Like all of the city, like the city has these requirements. They're all here. What do you mean? And he said, do you know what the loading dock looks like at the Museum of Modern Art? No. Well, yeah, plane ticket. Like I went to New York for a day and we went to look at the loading docks at MoMA, which in hindsight is insane. But like we went to MoMA and we
The two of you.
me and my manager at the time.
Okay.
Kenyon Jin is the guy.
Yeah.
And like I don't know what point Peter was trying to prove. There's something a little mercurial about the whole story, but like, damn it, like MoMA's got an exquisite loading dock. And so there is something to be said for, I don't even know, like great architects bring that greatness to everything that we do. And I guess like I at that time also needed a little bit more humility visited upon me, that just like everything that's part of these buildings is a pretty permanent part of your city. And if the only person that's going to interface with them on a daily, level are the people who are bringing their garbage to it, and the employees who are taking the garbage in and out of it, and the odd person who walks or drives by it, like that's cause enough to bring your A game and bring everything you got to it.
If it's not done correctly, then you're bottlenecking the street because the truck has to wait and can't make turns. And
my first design met all the technical requirements. Okay, I think the
sorry to offend.
Like, let's be clear. Like the first one met a level of like competency. But the second and the third ones were the times when we're like, okay, like we're gonna do this right. It's about more than just. I have this rant that I bring up in our office all the time, which is like the building code isn't a document that tells you how to build buildings. The building code is a definition for what it means to fail as a building. Everything that doesn't meet this standard is literally not good enough to exist. So this is a low bar. Like we're not looking to this for guidance on how to make great buildings here. We're looking for this for a legal definition of what it means to not fail. This is like your 50th percentile and should be treated accordingly. They do not have the city, the end user, everyone who's going to live here, their best interests are not captured in the building code. The building code is about keeping the worst and most cynical people from visiting their worst upon the public. That's it. And while compliance with that standard is, of course, a legal requirement, I think it's really essential to think for yourself about what all of those material and spatial and like constructive relationships are like in a finished building and how you can imagine them to be. Like that's the good stuff. And I think this whole like loading dock episode, which I haven't talked about in forever and is honestly like insane. And the next time I run into Peter, I have to ask him, like, what were you thinking putting us on a plane to get inspired about a loading dock? But
it worked.
I mean, here it is, like baked deep inside of me. Like this is what matters. Compliance isn't enough. You've got to bring your A game to everything.
Yeah.
And that's the architecture side of it. So then at the same time as this is like 2000 and now 9, 10, 11. My wife and I bought a house for a price that we don't mention to like anyone below the age of homeownership in like in a Toronto neighborhood
Yeah.
where we were able to do some work to it to like fix it up. And my boss was really cool about me being like the GC on that job site. And so I would be at site like 6:30 every morning, and I'd be there for like 2, 3 hours. And Peter was like a super early morning guy in the office at 7. I was in the office at 7. I started getting to the office at 9:30 and like staying later so that I could like be on site, maybe like run there and back in a cab over lunch. But we fixed up this house on Brookfield Street, and we were able then to like live there and then sell it at like really profit. And my wife and I, and Cameron was sort of always really involved in the design process of this from early on. Like, how should it function as a space?
Well, so what's Cameron's background?
Sure.
Because you said she went to school in the UK. We didn't say for what.
So Cameron was doing her master's in art history, has
Okay.
a background in art and historical,
Yeah.
especially like Renaissance art. So like deeply into aesthetics and the history of like furniture and domestic objects,
Yep.
and obviously like painting and sculpture of that era as well was sort of the big topic that we're to. And so throughout our time together, I think we just always, like in a lot of marriages, like really obsessed over those details of domesticity and building a life together and having meals together and hosting people in your home. We didn't have kids at this time. We do now, but just like we're both sort of quiet, bookish, attentive to the details, people in a lot of ways. And so I think we were both just happy to like build and share a language together, even like in our kind of early basic student apartment things around, like little domestic touches of comfort have been like a place where we've always been really like interested around the what are the more luxurious ways to deal with these things? How can we like do that ourselves? What are the ways in which, being aware of all the stuff that's out there, and yeah, just that whole like design integration of interior design and architecture and housing and domestic life and like comfort and luxury and travel and home. Those axes have really been like tied together around like that idea of home for us. And so the first house that we built was like a house for us, but it was also very much like a house for a demographic that we were really like representative of, which was sort of people buying like a first, second home in a neighborhood that was still kind of affordable, but like accessible to downtown, and was sort of very inhabited
Right.
by an aging population whose kids weren't living there anymore. And so that was just sort of a wave of, urban growth and gentrification in the city that we were really like a part of. So I started to do the second project like that. And my boss was like, oh, just so we're cool. Like, we were cool with you doing this once. But at a certain point, you've got to decide, like, are you an architect who works here, or are you like building and flipping houses? And and in hindsight, I probably, as like a boss now, maybe would have had that conversation sooner. But that was done with significant grace and tact. And I was like, oh, of course you're right. And I love my job, so let me go interview some contractors. And I did, and I should get the figure, but I was earning like $55,000 a year at that point. And all of the contractors that I interviewed were taking fees that were way higher than that to do our next project. And so it became pretty clear to me, like, I think I'm a contractor now. So I quit my job. I think I'd like just...
I think I'm a contractor now. Yeah.
So that's what I did. I had like just taken my licensing exams. I think I was like in the first wave of people coming out of my program to take the licensing exam. There's another guy in my year, Kelly Doran, who you should totally talk to, who the two of us just like crammed together for a week and took our licensing exams. and got our licenses. I got my stamp right away. I incorporated, and at that point, just as like Ed and Saskin architect, talked to like a practice advisor at the OAA, which is incredibly essential. I guess you reached out to people early on, like if you want to run a design build practice, this thing exists. If you want to run a design build practice, you got to go talk to the OAA because there is organizational and legal complexity. And even though we sort of face the world as Blue Lion Building, there's like a whole constellation of legal backend that allows us to be the designers and the builders while complying with, regulations around that stuff. So we had that house. We bought a piece of property on Markham Street, like a 25-foot wide lot, which seemed enormous.
My dad grew up on Markham Street.
Okay. We were like on the block just north of Dundas, at that point. We were like the 5th or 6th house north of Dundas there, close to the market. It's like a beautiful location. And we figured out pretty quickly that we could build 2 houses pretty similar to the house we just built on Brookfield Street on this one 25-foot lot. And this was like, was it 2013? Yeah, importantly, it was 2013, which is when the city of Toronto had just introduced brand new zoning bylaws across the city. And one of the important changes in those bylaws is that they had redefined the word duplex. Prior to 13, like the 86 bylaws, a duplex was 2 units that are wholly above and below each other. And the assumption there is that like somebody lives on the ground floor and somebody else lives on the 2nd floor. Great. And in 2013, they introduced the word wholly or partial. And that word partially, I don't know, like glowed off the page at me when I read it. Like how partial is partial. Because if they're only a tiny little bit above below each other, but mostly aside or like in front and in back to each other, then that just seemed like there was incredible creative potential as an architect, creating housing typologies that felt really good to live in as like house-like dense urban tucked away, but well-designed things that were partially above and below each other. And what we came up with there, it's maybe going to try and describe it verbally, but let's not get like there were 2 front doors that faced Markham Street, and the ground floor of the building was sort of like the Cancer zodiac sign. Like there were 2 front doors in the front, 2 back doors in the back, but one of the units kind of swelled up to be mostly the front half of the floor plate, and the other unit sort of swelled up to be mostly the back half.
So is there a hallway?
There was no shared hallway because there were 2 doors.
Yeah, no, I follow that. Was there a hallway from one door to get towards the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that hallway was above the front unit's basement and below the front unit's 2nd and 3rd floor.
Right.
And similarly, the front unit had a hallway to access the backyard.
Right.
And a parking spot off the laneway.
Yeah, I'm envisioning like the yin yang sign.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And there was a little like dot swell, like a powder room off of that hallway. So it was very much like the yin yang side. Yeah. And then on the upper levels, they were fully split front to back. So this is before laneway suites. The rear unit felt incredibly cool. Like you had these views that you wouldn't normally have. You had the width of the floor plate, which you wouldn't normally feel in a lot of these units. And it felt like a house. Like it had a basement and a ground floor and a 2nd floor and a 3rd floor. It was whatever that one was, like a 1,600 square foot 3-bedroom house and another one, both of them on the same lot. And then because of the work I'd done at Architects Alliance, I understood how condominium registration processes work. And so I thought like, we're just gonna, we'll bring the surveyors in and we'll get the property boundaries and work with a condo lawyer. We'll register the docs and we'll ask the city to give us a draft plan and they'll give us the ECS conditions and like, we'll satisfy them and we'll have a condo. And so we did. We had a 2-unit condo and there were hiccups along the way, but like we did it. And we were then able...
It's funny, as you say hiccups, now you know what I envision as the hiccup. I'm thinking about being in a plane and hitting turbulence.
There was turbulence.
Yeah. I just feel the plane drop, and then no, we can right the ship, and we'll land in the same spot.
Oh man, yeah. 'Cause once you do one, it's okay. Like it's possible. But the first one is this void where you're like, I believe there's a thing that we can arrive at. I should emphasize that nobody believed in this. Like I spoke to lawyers and actually lawyers were cool because it was abstract enough that they weren't saying, well, no one's ever done this before.
Right.
Planners and architects were really pushing back on this idea, like what you're gonna just like real estate guys in general, like real estate realtors and financiers, and what you're gonna have like a 2-unit condo board. What if they don't agree? You're like, they're just gonna have to.
I was gonna say, I assume that the real estate agents were pretty happy to come around when it was done and say, "Can I sell this for you?"
We have found people who really see things our way also, and that's been a gift.
Yeah.
But there were definitely challenges for them along the way too, to have to explain like, no, there's a reserve fund. Yeah, there's a board. Like all of this stuff we had to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think that, back to that like architecture school obsession about how do you bring this architectural mindset and like obsession over documentation, like how do you craft architectural solutions for these kind of more legalistic problems? For us, it's like the condo thing is a perfect example. You have to draft. Have you ever bought a condo before?
No.
Undoubtedly, you have listeners who have.
Yes.
And so they've received, disclosure statements
Yeah.
and condo docs and declarations and rules. And we said, great, let's like draft all of these things. It's like, whatever. It's not 100 pages of legal. It's a lot, but it's not like 100 pages of legal documents. Like I can read this and draw it and understand what it means. And let's draft all of these so that they are as much like a semi-detached house as possible. That was really it. Because when you say condo, everyone in like Toronto especially has a mental image of a certain kind of, size of tower with an underground parking garage and that kind of like window wall with like all the shadow lines and the mullions that bump out. And they spend a little bit more on the glass at the ground floors. Like the ceilings can be 15 feet high. So what they're seeing is really the city's zoning guidelines for like mid-rise and high-rise buildings. But that's what a condo is. What a condominium is a legal framework in Ontario since 1986 for a group of people to collectively own a real estate asset with collective rights and responsibilities to each other, while also individually owning a piece of that real estate asset that they could buy and sell without the consent of the others.
Yep. It's a great description. Very easy.
Took a while to get there.
No,
Thanks.
didn't. No. Got there at the right time.
It took the 15 years before this conversation.
Okay. Fair. Sorry. Well, I'm glad we didn't have this conversation 15 years ago.
It would, and so then it just felt like all the pieces were in place. We knew how to look at pieces of land and determine what could be built there.
Mm-hmm.
We knew how to design buildings that would really, in that like from our London experience, bespoke way, cater to the lifestyle of an imagined but like real demographic of people who wanted to like buy houses in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
We now had like built a couple of these things and understood the building code constraints, and we're building up a really good network of plumbers and electricians and tilers and landscapers and kind of filling in the rough edges ourselves. And at this point, I think we were still like a 2-person company, 3-person.
Was it just you and Cameron and maybe someone else on the side?
Yeah, and then we brought in another guy, Alex Visvari. He was like an early employee who these are my guys. Like there's always someone in every year of architecture school who got into it because they love buildings. And then they got out of school, and I found things to love in detailing parking garages and window wall details. But like,
hold on, what about stairwells?
And stairwells, of course, stairwells. You got to detail the exit stairs properly. There is a prevailing opinion that doing that, and to be fair, I did it for 3-4 years, not 20 plus, but like there is a prevailing opinion that this kind of work is like soul crushing. And I think for that kind of person who really gets into it because they love construction and then find themselves doing these like legal binding document architectural drawings and dealing with that very antagonistic culture of builders who thinks architects don't understand how buildings work and architects who are frustrated that builders aren't following their drawings, like that clash leads to a lot of bitterness and anger and resentment. And I like to say that for that person, like, I have your dream job. You're going to come work with me. You're going to wear steel toe boots. You're going to drive a truck. You're going to be on site for like 70-80% of the time building a nice duplex, triplex, fourplex building. And the rest of the time, you're going to be in the office with me. You're going to own a CAD file. We're going to detail the envelope together. You're going to use this CAD file that you own. Like, I got it permitted, but after that, it's your CAD file, and you're going to do all the lumber takeoffs off of it and all tile takeoffs off of it. And you're going to own it. You're going to draw the building and you're going to build the building. And that's been like, we've been really blessed in a certain way, but I think we are providing a job that doesn't really exist even in other design build firms, where like you as one person can be the designer and the builder and have real authorship under our, guidance. Cameron and I are setting parameters here for how these buildings are going to function, what they're going to look like, but it's a really, easy for me to say, collaborative process internally. And that's been like great for us. Like for 10 plus years, we've been able to sort of provide that job to people, and like want to continue to for forever. Like it's a job I would have really thrived in early in my career also. So
What year did you find the practice?
in 11.
2011.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many projects to date have you completed?
26 or 27. So it's it's like 2-3
A year.
a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a slow, steady.
Which ultimately can also be correlated to, let's say, if it's 2 to 3 a year and they're anywhere from a duplex to a quadplex.
Yeah, so you're talking about them like 7, 8, 9 units per year.
Yeah.
And then we really try, not just we try, like we really commit to everything's a one. Like even in a duplex, they're not the same two units. There'd be like, we'll throw that wrench in to force ourselves to do that. There's never a 50-50 split. We never split the triplexes into equal thirds. We always find some sort of niche
Variation,
something, variations that you have to like not repeat the bathroom, not repeat the kitchen, think about the stairs differently. And of course, over whatever that unit count is, 30, 40, 50 units, you start to be like, I like this solution better than that one. Like this laundry room works better upstairs and this one works better, or whatever. But it really forces you to take advantage of every inch on the site, every inch in the envelope, every inch in the building, in a way that just like requires invention. And it's really frustrating when you're only like 70-80% of the way there. You're like, this doesn't work. And I know it can, and I know it will, but it doesn't work today. Like that's where I'm going from here. I've got a floor plan where I know we're going to get all the pieces to like shake and settle out somehow, but something's got to move downstairs and something has to rotate. And, we took an indent on this side and maybe it needs to go on the opposite side. And I love doing that maybe more than anything that I do professionally, but like it's not working until it's working. And that process of being almost but not quite there is like an incredible frustration, and really requires just that level of trust in the iterative process, that like working with a really small trusted group of like team members at this point, we can reiterate and reiterate and reiterate until we find it. And I think that thinking really infects, for better and worse, like our construction management processes too.
Yeah.
Where you're like, the budget's $1.8 million and it's going to be $1.8 million. And we used to think we were going to put, this much into the windows, into the kitchen. And all of a sudden that's starting to like flip a little bit. But something can only take when something else gives.
Yeah.
In that.
Again, so Bruce is one of the owners of the company. He always likes to use analogies, and it's funny. I do too, but mine are completely different. And my analogy for this is like you're working with a small group that understand how to build the Jenga tower.
Sure. Yeah, totally. There's a Tetrasinus about it. Yeah.
And I say it because you play Jenga with someone that doesn't understand it, and it's like the tumultuous relationship that can occur between a builder and an architect. Where if you're working with someone that understands how to play the game, you're probably going to be able to get the tower past 36 stories. So
I think this is a story that doesn't show me in the best light, but I'm going to share it anyway because it's nice about my wife. Cameron and I were playing Jenga with a friend who had like recently moved to Canada and was unfamiliar with it.
yeah,
And I explained the rules as like, I take out a block and put it on top, and then you take out a block and put it on top, and we try and do it in such a way so that it like falls down on your turn instead of mine. And then my wife described just like, no, like you take out a block and put it on top, and then I do, and we try and do it in such a way that we could build the tallest tower that we can together.
correct.
And I felt like, oh man, I've been
playing this wrong.
There's really a much gentler way to think about this that I like a lot better. It like resonates with my values a little more than I thought. Oh man, I just showed my hand. So
is there? I think that one of the more interesting elements about the way that you describe what you do is that this is not a cookie cutter style of design and construction. This is really taking all of the elements that you have learned over all the years and that you continue to want to expand upon and develop completely net new designs on each one of these projects, which really give the owners an opportunity to be able to have something that is completely custom to them in their ownership.
At like affordability is an incredibly fraught word, but I speak publicly with spreadsheets up on that. I'm happy to be very transparent with everybody about all of our costs and revenues and everything else. We definitely provide a custom home like housing thing at a much lower price than the same kind of house would in that location. Like the value proposition of what we do, there's a whole development side to this that like I'm happy to get into. We don't have to get into, but like there's a whole real estate partnership, financing, construction debt element to what we do also. I run a development corporation. And the value proposition of that is that you can, if you want to live in this location, right? Real estate's all location, but if you want to live at whatever, Bloor and Ossington, you can live in a more expensive thing that's just like this. You can live in a smaller thing that's just as nice. You can live in a thing of this size in this location that is like much doesn't provide the same kind of amenities or square footage. Like you've got to find the thing to sacrifice on between budget and quality and location and size. And I think we've sort of shaken those up in a way that doesn't exist anywhere else in the market, which is like we over deliver on quality, which itself has this sort of like design ambition about, interior designs that are experimental and imbued with personality instead of just like what's inoffensive, right? And so there's just much more care there, even if it's more individualistic to us and our taste. And also just like construction quality, like we're so obsessive around building science and materials and systems and experimenting with cladding systems and insulation and passive-ish principles and all that kind of stuff. So like over delivering like crazy on the quality side. Being at the locations, we've always been in like fairly kind of like prime adjacent neighborhoods, right? We've never been a kind of like zone 2, zone 3 builder. We just like want to build where lots of people want to live, where that urban, dense, cosmopolitan life is, where there's transit infrastructure, where there's good, cafes and restaurants, and like less so now once around like employment. Like it's just really about being around that good cultural stuff. And then they're kind of big. Like they're not sort of small units. They're like 2-3 units plus, 2-3 bedrooms plus outdoor space and some kind of like parking, usually, not always. Whole other thing that we're really digging deep into lately. 3 stories plus basements. And so it sort of delivers all those things with the trade-off that like there's some real density. You're not just, living in that house on a freehold, freestanding, detached thing on a lot. You're building it in a kind of building with 2 or 3 other units with some like legal complexity. Like you have some responsibilities to the other people living with you in this small complex. But the trade-off is you get all the things in exchange for the density. And I
Right.
think that's like in a micro scale, that's what cities do. You get access to all this good stuff, and you've got to like make nice with people who are like a little bit different from you also. Great. Like, and thus the world advances.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in the kind of micro and like macro relevance and like importance of what we're doing perhaps.
And is there a design aesthetic that you really try to employ, or you try to not employ? That's the wrong
Yeah.
word, but to create for these projects? Yeah. What is it?
I mean, it's so hard to self-diagnose your design aesthetic. There's definitely a point where you're like, okay, it's part of the family now. Like especially working through the elevations, like what it's gonna present to the street and the window and the pattern and the palette. And there's just a point where like, okay, like let's go for zoning, but this isn't quite right. And then like you get the zoning and you've like tweaked it a few more times, and I like fill these sketchbooks with like drawing after drawing after drawing of like what if we pushed and pulled it this way, create it that way, because on the one hand, it seems like there's not that many variables. Like all of our lots are 18, 20, 22, 24, 27, 30 feet wide,
Mm-hmm.
right? The buildings either have like 0 or 18-inch or 3-foot or 5-foot side yard setbacks. They're all kind of like 10 or 11 or 12 meters high. They're meeting that main wall requirement. There's a step back or there isn't. There's an inset for the entry or there isn't. It enters on the side or it doesn't. And then it's going to be made out of something non-combustible. So in the world of like metal and brick, and we did a slate one recently. We've done some tile, but like, there's not. I mean, within those, the closer you look at it, the deeper it goes. And then the windows are, I guess Cameron really brought this in early. Like I was coming out of Architects Alliance thinking that, modern means big windows. We started looking at more historical precedents of urban housing typologies. And so brownstones and like London and Boston
Yeah.
and Brooklyn. And we just started getting really obsessed with repetitive window patterning. So there you go. Repetitive window patterning is like a big part of what we do. And when we line up our buildings side by side, there's all of these 27-inch, 30, 36-inch wide windows that are kind of 4, 5, 6, 7 feet tall, and just a lot of subtle adjustments to those patterns. What if they line up across the floors? What if they don't? As you inset and step out, are they going to like do things to trick your perspective from certain angles? Are they going to be perfectly gridded? I love messing up a grid just a little bit, getting something that really repeats for a while, and then just getting one that's like just off for a way that really makes sense on the inside, but is a little incongruous on the outside.
Yeah.
So the way they look on the outside, yeah, there's that moment, and I still couldn't quite, like I couldn't write an algorithm to do it.
That's because you're not coding.
That's, I guess it. I don't know to what extent I could accurately articulate all the parameters
Fair.
around the decision making, but there's absolutely a point in the process where you're like, yeah, this is part of the family.
Right.
And then internally, it's like just part is just being aware of the world. Like, what are the things out there that we like? You got to spend time in other people's buildings. You got to get pushed out of your comfort zone. You got to deal with your suppliers. It can't just be like, we found the perfect kitchen and faucet in 2012 and I never have to think about it again. Maybe there's one that's better and it's twice the price, so we're not doing it, or there's a cheaper one, or there's a different material, or like that was nice, but it has this other drawback. Or now they've got a new model that allows like the handle and the faucet to be like separated by a couple of inches or feet. And like that's really cool. And like, do we care about foot actuated stuff? We probably don't. And so you gotta just, I mean, it's like the classic architect's problem. Like you just have to know everything and then apply it with taste, right?
Yeah.
But there is this like obsessive thirst for, I don't know if knowledge is exactly the thing, but for just like knowing what's out there, to want to say like, this is a way to experiment a little more, to like shake our stuff up so that we're not doing like the same thing over and over again.
Got it. Okay. So let's get into just a brief little bit about both. I guess it's going to be yours and Cameron's, but What is your ability to disconnect from this? And do you have an ability to disconnect from this? And when you do, what does that look like?
Oh yeah.
Knowing that you're no longer in a band like you were when you were in your teenage years.
Yeah, no, it's I mean we have a family too. So
Yeah.
there's a necessity around that, which is great. You got to just take your kids to their activity and my kids are for sports and have their things and we get out into the countryside and we go skiing and get outside and we got a big dog and a small dog, so they've got to go out into the world too and
Yep.
and get their nature time. So yeah, like getting out into the woods, into the mountains, like out into the country, it is really an important part of breaking away from it all.
Yeah.
And just knowing Cameron's way better than I am. Like you run a business with your partner and one of you is going to be the worst one about like sitting in bed saying, oh, what about the, and she's got the discipline to shut me down and just, book a meeting. We'll talk about it then, which has been much, much, much better for everybody's mental health. But it's, it's our life. Like there is a real sense of immersion in it too. And I don't dislike that aspect of it. But
Right.
outside of Architects Alliance, all of my other professional experiences are really for husband and wife companies working out of their, basements or living rooms or like the rented space around the corner. Like I think there is something really pleasant about the lifestyle that comes from having your domestic life and your professional life kind of adjacent to each other. I grew up around my dad's company. Like I really like my kids having my business to like come in and out of. And, my littlest knows how to like, when we go to a construction site, he goes and finds a broom and pushes it around and it's adorable. But like, it's also, there's a value in there that I don't think there's any other way to pass on except for like that. So I think it's clear that I'm not the best at separating this out and it causes me tremendous anxiety and the occasional like panic attack. But
Seem pretty calm as you describe that.
the detachment helps. Yeah, we've been looking at all kinds of things. And I think building up a team, we went through this kind of tragedy. So this guy, Alex Isvari, worked for us for years. And for a long time, it was just the three of us. And he was sort of my construction guy who could really draw. And like the relationship between the three of us was the sort of great triangle of decision making. And then I don't know, crafts today. So he died 3 years ago today. He's like a young guy who was in his 30s. He got cancer. He got better. It came back. He got better again. And then it came back a third time and he passed away.
Sorry.
Thanks. And wow, I really wasn't thinking of going here today. And it's like literally today. And so
There's a reason why we booked this today without
everything
knowing
for
it.
a reason.
Yeah.
I think that like the personal dimension of it aside, which was an incredible tragedy for everyone who like knew and loved him, which was like a tight circle of people that we knew really well. As a business, it really exposed to us the like fragility of what we did. Like we're so few people that just like the absence of one person is like a really profound loss that like 3 years later, I still noticed little stumbles around. And so we made a pretty serious decision afterwards that just like embracing professionalization, we started hiring people that are like meaningfully younger than us instead of just our peers. We engaged like a business coach, which was like a really great process we should like dig deeper into. We just started writing out our standard operating procedure document, which is like a really important document. But the first draft was like me with my laptop at the foot of Alex's like bed in the hospital and just trying to like write down everything that we did. And that's not a usable document. So then like bringing someone else into the team who can really like as an outsider breathe life into that document and examine every process in it. So hiring since then has been a lot more focused. Like we're a little less obsessed with finding generalists and more about finding people with like really specific skills so that the company as a whole isn't so reliant on, every single bit of intelligence and taste passing through like my brain and Cameron's brain back and forth a half dozen times before it goes out into the world, it's like building a team that you can trust. And it feels like we're sort of like 3 years into that process now.
It's hard.
It's working, but like it's hard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're building a company at that point more than building a building.
Yes.
And that's probably a healthier way to think about it, but it's been
It's hard. It's hard to relinquish, in some ways, control over some of that stuff.
yeah.
And beyond just control, I'm going to try to find the right words to describe this, but the trust that people are going to fulfill what you hired them to fulfill when they don't have the same vested interest in the business success, when they can decide that they want to leave.
Yeah.
And so you contemplate on a regular basis, is this person actually really committed to this? And it takes time to develop that level of trust with them that they are. And if you give them more, they can do it. But really, have you hired the right person? And that lack of, because you can't see the next 3 years what the business is going to look like. So you don't know.
You don't know. There's an analogy here that I think is really useful. And I'm going to have to refer back to this too, because those are absolutely like the doubts that rack me through the process. But we over deliver on design. We just do. Like we could.
For yourselves.
Absolutely. But I just.
Which is part of what's funny, right?
I wouldn't do it any other way, but it is not lost to me that we could make significantly less ambitious buildings architecturally for the same financial outcomes. I think it's a recipe for disaster and alienation.
Yeah,
and
well, all the other stuff
and
doesn't matter. I mean, okay, because you're not doing it.
But we do, right? We build these buildings to a certain standard and imbue them with a lot of personality and then sell them, right? Like we don't even build them for a person where there's this intense personal like client architect relationship. Yeah. Like we build them speculatively in a way that everyone else in our industry derides, like in the spec building industry derides, and we measurably are not more profitable for it in any so long as you're focused on any one project. I think it allows us to fill brand. I think it allows us to work with great subcontractors who really like value having that opportunity and being involved in the process. I think it really builds like loyalty and longevity out of our employees, and I think it gives us a tremendous amount of professional satisfaction. It's the right thing to do, but it absolutely is like an over delivery of quality. I think it's the same thing. Like there's an equivalent human resources attitude here where you just, I think, check in with me in 3 years, have to treat your employees as if they're like on a pathway to being owner operator of a business like themselves, like this one day, and you're going to give them all of the skills to do that. You're going to give them all the secrets. You're going to help them avoid all the pitfalls. You're going to treat them like they are on a path to be able to do. And I know I just said like we really like people with specific skills over generalists in some way more now, but to the extent that they're interested in learning anything that we do, like we're here to teach them how to do that thing and to guide them in getting there. And in that way, I mean, one, I think it really helps them be satisfied that they're not in like a dead-end job. They're like in a job with basically limitless growth potential. And two, it really forces us to be in that position that I want to be in, where you're like treating everyone as if you're expecting the best of them, because more often than not, like they deliver that to you.
Yeah.
So that's just our values in a certain way, right? Like we're going to make the house as nice as they need to be. We're going to treat our employees as if they are like the best people they can hate. And that ends up, most often than not being true. And on the occasional time that it's not a good fit, you got to like recognize that early.
Yeah.
And
hopefully
cut it out and move on. Yeah. Like that's the lesson on that side of it. So that's like kind of where we got to. I think the next phase was really about recognizing that we don't have to do all of these things. We're like this mid-career phase, I like to call it now, where like we have powers and we have these sort of like abilities and track record and all that, and are starting to get like a tiny bit of recognition, at least within the very like narrow niche of exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And then it's really about like growth and scale and how can we make more of this happen without having to like suffer the risk of financing it all
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
And that's been the kind of most recent thing of like, how do we engage with other people financially to produce more of these kinds of buildings?
Right.
And that's like the next decade.
Well, we're gonna have to have you back on and talk about that in another couple of years.
Sure.
Evan, I greatly appreciate you doing this with me. I'm happy that we first connected about this. I'm happy that you're so eloquently able to describe both what you do, but the process and how you do it. It has been such an enjoyment for me to be able to sit and chat with you about all of this, as was the first few phone calls that we had when we were talking about doing this. So thank you for taking time out of the day to do this with me.
You're an incredibly gifted interviewer, and it's a real pleasure to go through some of these old things that I haven't reflected on in a really long time. So yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Well, and I'm also really happy to know that we are able to record this on a very, very important day.
Yeah, it's an anniversary for sure. Hey, thanks very much.